Welcome back, everyone. Today, we're diving straight into a fascinating micro to macro explainer. We're going to do a full recap of the entire web of life. We'll start incredibly small, looking at the strict rules of what actually makes something alive, and then we'll zoom all the way out to the massive global water cycle that keeps that life going. And of course, the environmental shifts threatening to disrupt the whole shebang. It's this brilliantly interconnected system, and understanding the big picture here is absolutely crucial. Let's get into it.
Here's our roadmap for this full recap. First, the definition of life. Second, measuring our biodiverse world. Third, water, the ultimate sustainer. Fourth, disrupting the water cycle. And finally, a global environmental recap. Okay, starting off with Section 1, the definition of life.
So, to kick things off, I want you to picture a scenario. Imagine your little brother runs up to you with some weird object in a glass jar, and he's absolutely convinced this thing is alive. But how do we actually know? Like, what specific observations would prove to you that it's a living organism, and not just some weirdly shaped rock or a piece of random debris?
Well, to answer that definitively, biologists use this strict little checklist known as the 7 characteristics of living things. You'd basically do a rapid-fire observation of the specimen. You're checking for things like excretion. Is it getting rid of waste? You look for sensitivity. Does it actually react to its environment, like a sudden change in light? And of course, you look for movement. Along with reproduction, respiration, growth, and nutrition, these essentially make up the ultimate vital signs of life. What's really wild is that even a seemingly dead, dry little seed eventually checks all these boxes once you plant it. But bottom line, if that mystery object in the jar doesn't at least have the potential for these 7 traits, it's not alive. It really is that simple and that strict.
Moving right along to Section 2, measuring our biodiverse world.
Now, to wrap our heads around the staggering, massive diversity of life out there, we have to look for stark structural contrasts. Take vertebrates, for example. We can pretty easily single out mammals. They're covered in hair or fur, they give birth to live young, and remarkably, they can actually control their own internal body temperature. Then we can contrast them straight away with reptiles. Reptiles have dry, scaly skin, they lay leathery eggs on land, and their body temperature is entirely at the mercy of their surroundings. By spotting these really distinct differences, we're able to map out the entire animal kingdom.
But hey, it's not just animals, right? We apply similar identification keys to classify plant life too. If you're standing in the middle of a vast forest, you can separate all that flora just by using distinct visual observations. You might notice delicate, feathery leaves that instantly give away a fern. Or you might spot big, bright flowers, the development of fruits, or maybe the tough, needle-like leaves of a tree that's evolved to withstand super harsh conditions. It's these visual keys that let us categorize things and get a true measure of our planet's biodiversity.
Which brings us to Section 3, water, the ultimate sustainer.
We constantly call Earth the blue planet because water covers the globe, but there's a huge catch. The vast majority of the water on our planet is actually salty ocean water. The crucial fresh water that all land-based life relies on is severely limited. And incredibly, most of that precious fresh water isn't even flowing in rivers or lakes. It's locked away, stored as solid ice in massive glaciers and polar ice caps.
So why exactly is water so absolutely essential? Honestly, it's practically a magical resource with these really unique properties that make life as we know it possible. First off, it's a remarkably good solvent. That means lots of things dissolve right into it, which is completely vital for transporting nutrients and letting chemical reactions happen inside living cells. Second, and this is actually super unusual, when water freezes into ice, it floats. Because it floats, it creates this protective, insulating layer right on the surface of lakes and oceans, preventing the water underneath from freezing solid and wiping out all the aquatic life down there. And finally, water is incredibly stable when we're talking about temperature. It takes a massive amount of energy to heat it up, and it cools down very, very slowly.
To really put that temperature stability into perspective, just take a look at the stark contrast in this data. If you check out the columns tracking the mean maximum and minimum air temperatures over a 12-month period, you see these wild, dramatic swings from summer to winter. But then, look over at the far right column tracking the mean sea temperature. It barely budges. It remains incredibly stable all year round. And that stability is an absolute lifesaver. It creates a safe, consistent environment for marine life, which means those organisms don't have to constantly burn precious energy just trying to survive massive, sudden temperature drops.
All right, Section 4, disrupting the water cycle.
Sadly, right now, we're seeing a very specific, very concerning cause and effect chain reaction happening on a global scale. It goes like this. Burning fossil fuels releases carbon dioxide into the atmosphere. All that CO2 essentially acts like a giant blanket, trapping heat and causing global temperatures to rise. Because the planet is warmer, water starts evaporating way faster out of the soil. And critically, those vital stores of fresh water we talked about earlier, the glaciers and polar ice caps, they're melting incredibly fast. As they melt, all that precious water just dumps straight into the salty sea, shrinking our freshwater reserves and causing the warming oceans to physically expand.
Now, this isn't just about the weather getting a little bit toastier. This disruption creates violent, unpredictable extremes in our weather cycle. Sure, more water is evaporating, but higher temperatures also whip up stronger winds. Those winds literally blow rain clouds away from the regions that desperately need them, which means droughts are now lasting much, much longer. And when the rain finally does show up, it's not a gentle, nourishing shower anymore, it's a violent downpour. Because the rain comes down so intensely, it completely fails to soak into that hard-baked soil. Instead, most of it just runs off, triggering extreme flooding, while somehow leaving the soil underneath completely thirsty and depleted.
Let's pull this all together in Section 5, a global environmental recap.
When we look at our source material for this recap, it neutrally highlights a pretty stark dual reality about human progress. The science we use to extract and burn fossil fuels for global transport and to generate electricity undoubtedly brings massive benefits to people all over the globe. I mean, it literally powers our modern world. But concurrently, it drives immense environmental problems, specifically by pumping out the exact carbon dioxide that is fueling this rapid climate change.
It all comes down to this. Absolutely everything is connected. As the seas get warmer and physically expand, and as our vital freshwater ice stores rapidly shrink, the very foundation of the Earth's water cycle is shifting. And because we know water is the ultimate sustainer, when that cycle goes out of whack, the primary support system for all of that amazing biodiverse life we classified earlier is fundamentally threatened. So this whole full recap really leaves us with one incredibly provocative question. We know exactly what life requires to survive, and we know that the immense biodiversity of Earth relies entirely on the predictable stability of that water cycle. So, as our climate rapidly changes, the very resource that every living thing depends on, how will the biological world adapt? How will it survive an environment that we're altering at such an unprecedented speed? Something to really think about. Thank you so much for joining me for this explainer today. Keep asking those big questions, and I'll catch you next time.